Hello and welcome. I'm so glad you could be with us tonight. We're going to talk about a big topic, I think one that we're all tuned into these days. We're going to talk about anxiety, but we're going to really zero in more on anxiety in our kids, our grandchildren, our children, our nieces, nephews, neighbor kids, anyone you know who's a young person. It's a real age of anxiety right now, and going to be asking my guest, who's an expert with children and on this topic, all about anxiety. And I think some of what she says will apply to us too, because it's pretty universal. My guest is Tina Feigal. She's been on before. You may have caught her interview before, or I think you've been on twice.
Yes, I have.
Through the years. She's a wonderful guest. She's a parent-child educator. She does training. She's an author. She's written a couple books. We have her newest book here to share with you. The title I love, it's Present Moment Parenting, The Guide to a Peaceful Life with Your Intense Child. And this book came out just several months ago, but I still consider it hot off the press. She has a blog, she does coaching, and you're a busy educator, Tina.
Yes, I am. It's really a great job, though, because when you're able to really actually see the results, it just keeps you going.
And the reviews I've read about how parents view your work they are so positive. Just
thank you. Yes, and I love getting that feedback. And now we even have like pre and post questionnaires that we have people fill out just to see on paper how is the relationship with the child before coaching, and what's it like after, and what's the child's behavior like before and after, and what are the child's characteristics before and after. The parents fill out these questionnaires, and we're seeing really excellent results.
That's neat to have it kind of measurable.
Yeah.
Because, that's important for some people. When we just use the word anxiety, I'm sure we all have our own definition, but what's yours?
My definition is that anxiety is fear where there's no present threat. So we bring the past into our present moment all the time, thinking about, I can't have that happen because last time it happened, it was awful, and so.
What if?
Yeah, what if? What if, all the time. And what if history repeats itself? And so fear where there's no present threat, that's the way I identify it.
So we really, as people who get anxious, and I think we all do it at certain points, we're really overdoing our worry, aren't we? We're going to the extreme more than we'd have to.
Yes, I think there's just so much information out there about parenting, and it's so easy for parents to feel like they're doing it wrong all the time. And so I think that builds their anxiety, and sometimes the children catch it from them because they're being warned all the time that this bad thing could happen, and parents just feel so responsible for everything that has to do with their children, and partly because there's just too much information, there's just too much watching, I think, going on.
Do you think, Tina, that a child's anxiety correlates with the family anxiety?
Oftentimes it does.
So if you are lucky enough to be raised in a very serene, stable, not a lot of change kind of family, you're less likely to be anxious as a young person?
Yes, I think so. And because anxiety is like very contagious. You probably noticed that.
Yeah, that's
if you're
a good
around
word.
an anxious person,
Right, it is, isn't it? I had an assistant once, and she talked real fast and was kind of an anxious person, and I remember feeling that, oh my goodness, I picked up on it really, easily, I think. And yeah, it is contagious, that's a good word. And yet, I'm guessing you're not wanting parents to think that they're causing their child's anxiety either.
Well, what I want parents to know is if they have a child who's exhibiting anxiety, there's a lot they can do to help them feel calmer. You know, I take it from the perspective of parents are very powerful in their ability to help their children's behavior and their sense of self really improve. So that's the way I look at it.
That's a positive approach. You use the word or the verb, if a child is seen by their parents, they're going to have less anxiety.
Yes.
And that is an intriguing word. I've heard it used some other places, but tell us and tell the viewers exactly what you mean by that.
Well, when a little baby is born, he or she has an amygdala in their brain, sort of near the brain stem, and it's the threat alarm. And if the baby looks up to the parents and is seen by the parents and the needs get fulfilled and the baby cries, someone picks the baby up, baby is hungry, someone feeds him or her, changing is needed, changing happens, you know, all of the needs get met, then the amygdala doesn't start to fire like there's no threat. But if the parents, for whatever reason, are not able to fulfill the needs of the baby, which is a huge job. It's a huge job.
Especially that first baby.
Yeah, especially the first baby. And if they're not able to fulfill that child's needs, then the amygdala will say threat, threat, threat. So if the child is seen, the amygdala can calm down because I need those people to survive. If they don't see me, my brain is going to register that I'm not going to survive.
So it's like a synonym for if they don't pay attention to me?
That's right.
Would that be another way to put it?
Pay attention and fulfill my needs.
Oh, and take care of me too.
That's right, that's right.
So could we use that same analogy or same wording and say, if I'm working for a boss and he doesn't pay attention to me, take care of my needs that I might exhibit as a worker, I'm going to feel more anxious.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
Anybody who doesn't feel seen in a marital relationship or a friendship or parent-child relationship, they're going to feel anxious.
Well, it makes sense, you know, and we all have that amygdala, right?
We all do.
I mean, it's something that's there, that it's part of the brain.
Right, and when a child is anxious, sometimes that amygdala fires in the parent too, you know. And
I'm sure.
You know, and so
it's a vicious circle, isn't it?
It is, and I say to parents, you have an amygdala too, you know, and they're like, oh yeah, I guess I do, you know. So they get triggered and act in a way maybe they don't want to act oftentimes, and then it's off to the races because then it's like a vicious circle.
And maybe we'll talk some later about how to break into that cycle.
Yeah.
When we think about causes of anxiety in kids, what are some of the biggies?
Family change is one. Having parents separate or divorce, or having a parent die, that's the biggest one actually. Or changing homes, or just sometimes they're born a little more anxious than the average bear. They just sometimes come with wiring that is anxiety.
Wired more tightly, we might say.
Yes. Sometimes really intelligent children have more anxiety because they can conceptualize things way beyond their ability to act on them. So they can think about tornadoes for the first time. I mean, when you think about it, we hear about everything for the very first time. So when the child thinks about a tornado, he or she doesn't realize that a tornado isn't always going to come and hit their house. They don't have the life experience to know that there's a siren that goes off and that we all go in the basement, and usually it's August, and usually the sky turns green. You know, we have ways to take care of ourselves, but kids sometimes don't even think to ask, well, what would happen? They just kind of carry the anxiety around with them without realizing everybody doesn't feel that same anxiety.
So the more intelligent child is more prone. How big of a factor is the genetic predisposition or disposition?
Well, I think that if a parent is anxious, it's either genetic or it's environmental. And I don't know if we can sort those two things out, just because the effect is pretty much the same.
Okay, so that's a given that we just deal with then
because
as family
anxiety,
members.
It's contagious when it's in the air, you know.
Right. Well, if we break anxiety into age groups, let's do that, because there may be some very different kinds of scenarios here. But how about young children?
The number one anxiety for a young child is being separated from the parents. As we all know, it's hard for them to get used to going to preschool, for instance, because mommy and daddy drop me off and leave me with people that I don't know, or even daycare as a really young child. So separation from parents, that's the number one anxiety producer. And then just that whole, if they're bright and they hear about these things for the first time, they just don't have a way to comfort themselves.
When we think of real young kids, and I think it sounds like you're including the very young, the terrible twos.
Yeah.
Is there some reason that is a more anxious time for kids?
Yes, because new awarenesses come when you're 2. And every time you get new awarenesses, you're not sure how to comfort yourself about those new awarenesses. So, and then also you're so driven to do everything for yourself, and if someone comes along and does it for you instead, that goes against everything that's driving you right at that moment. You know, you have to be in charge of your own eating and your own bathroom habits and you have to be in charge of those things. And if someone else acts like they're in charge, that'll make you really anxious because they don't see you.
So that's where the no comes out.
That's where the no comes out.
No, I want to do it my way.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting, Tina.
Yeah.
In some of your writing I've read before, you talk about saying that this is so natural that we don't want to think of the child as misbehaving as much as just responding in a normal way to the challenges of development, right?
Yes, exactly. And I think if we can take the blame and the judgment and the punishment out of the scene and really see what the child's actually going through, then we're miles ahead of the game, because we're going to treat them in a completely different way that doesn't continue to trigger their anxiety.
So this wish to control, as a parent, there are, some things you could say, well, yes, I'll let you eat your French fries just the way you want them. Other things you may say, to yourself and to the child, no, this isn't going to work. We can't let you do it your way.
Yeah.
Are there some tips you have in terms of how to say no to that child who wants to be in control?
Yes. I like to ask parents, well, how is that going to work out? I tell them to say to the children, how's it going to work out if you want to watch TV right now, but we need to be at Grandma's house in 15 minutes, and it takes that long to drive there, so how will that work out? So what it does is it gets the children thinking the way that the parents think, and they're actually solving a puzzle instead of just staying in opposition, like, no, I don't want to get out of the house right now.
So they feel they're part of the solution.
Yes.
And that would make them feel really good, I bet.
Yeah, grown up.
Yeah.
And they're using
booster thing.
Yeah, ego booster. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's kind of a paradigm shift, Tina, really.
It is.
From the way a lot of parents would view this.
Yes.
Kind of scenario, isn't it?
Yes. They want children to think the way they think, but they don't know how to usually invite them to think the way they think. They just think they have to be in charge of it, make all the decisions, and the child should comply. But boy, they run into a buzzsaw when they think that way, because they're not including the child. And it's another, you don't see me,
So then a vicious cycle again. The mother or father gets frustrated.
Yep.
They get more tense. The child picks up on the tension.
Yep.
Things escalate, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Let's move to the middle-aged child, the middle schooler, let's say. So kids 6th grade and up to high school. What are some of their challenges and as you see them as a educator?
Yes. As the children move into middle school, peers become the number one way that they gauge themselves. Am I like my peers, or am I different from my peers? And how can I be more like them so that I can fit in? You know, that's the inner drive. Like we talked about, the 2-year-old had an inner drive to do it him or herself. The inner drive of a middle schooler is fit in, be like everybody.
And so that's also a cause of anxiety.
Yes, because
right? I mean, if I feel I don't fit in, and probably even most kids would have that feeling at times, right?
Absolutely.
No matter how realistic it is.
That's right. That's right. It's what they feel inside. It doesn't always match what's actually happening out there. And that's another thing for parents to remember. It's what's going on inside the child, not the logical, you know, no, they didn't mean it that way, but how did the child feel it? You know, and that's what I encourage people to listen to, so that the child feels seen.
You and I were talking before we started taping about homework, and I think that can be a tremendous anxiety-causing thing for kids.
Absolutely.
And as they get older, there's more pressure. And you shared the most interesting thing. Tell the viewers what you just told me.
Well, the number one country in the world for education outcomes is Finland, and they don't have homework.
They don't have any homework.
No.
Not even at any part of the whole age span?
I think that what I was reading about was in the elementary grades.
Oh, okay.
And they might introduce it in the middle school and high school, but they
early years,
they don't burden the children with homework when they're that young.
That's so interesting. There was an article I read in the Star Tribune just recently, and it said that homework that is just given to sort of review what you have been taught has less positive effect than homework given that helps you think more creatively and outside the box.
Exactly. There's so many children, they don't want to just regurgitate the thing that they learned during the day. Repetition, I mean, it's good for some kids, but there are some kids for whom that is just drudgery, and they will refuse, even though they're completely capable of doing the homework. They refuse because it's drudgery.
And they view it that way, so that would feel more irritating, wouldn't it? You know,
and
you think about it from their point of view.
Yeah, I mean, just think about if we were asked to do that. You know, if we were asked to do drudgery, you know, 2 + 2 = 4 kind of work for 20 minutes after school every day or something like that, you know, and there were these giants in our lives who were demanding that we do it. You know, just imagine how we would oppose that desire for us. I mean, it's the same for kids.
Yeah, that's a good way to view it. Speaking of articles I've read just in preparation for getting to sit with you, another one was about smartphones.
Yes.
And this applies to both middle school now and older, and probably some younger children too, but it said the happiness level of children and young people has gone down since the advent of the smartphone.
Yes.
And I was really intrigued by that. Why do you think that's true?
Because the shift has happened where they relate to people on their phones instead of with each other. So they are not learning the social interactions, ways to get out of a mess with a friend, for instance. And they're also not mature enough to refrain from making fun of other people on social media. So it's sort of like putting a weapon in the hands of the children that they're just not old enough to handle. They're just, you know, they don't have the thinking ability and the discernment to use it in a way that is respectful and healthy for their peers. So the anxiety level of the children who are on the receiving end of that kind of thing is through the roof.
Well, we read about suicide in kids, and that often is one of the things they're looking at, the use of social media, which is extremely sad and scary.
It is.
What do you say to parents that you're working with in terms of how to handle having your child have a smartphone?
I just really encourage parents to make sure that the smartphone is in the kitchen charging overnight after 9 o'clock or 8:30 so that it's not going to bed with the child, to also check the phone, to have all the passwords on the phone, to just see what kind of conversations are going on. It's like this is a parental authority thing that we didn't used to have to think about, but we absolutely have to think about it now.
So you don't feel that that would be viewed as too intrusive, or it might be, but that's, you better still do it, right?
We have to be more intrusive than we ever have been before because of the power of predators being on those social media sites and such. We just
Some
have
of the
to.
dangers.
Yes.
So the risk of being intrusive is outweighed by the dangers, or the dangers cause one to need to be intrusive.
And I think if parents, I think if parents decide in advance, okay, here's your phone, my 12-year-old, and we're going to talk now about the terms of the phone use. I'm paying for the phone, and here's your part. Your part is to stay off social media that is harmful. My part is to check to be sure that that's happening. And my part is to look at the conversations that are going on social media on your phone, and your part is to be as respectful of your peers as you possibly can. So this is our agreement. If our agreement isn't kept, then the phone comes back to me.
So a real clear-cut boundary kind of a discussion.
Yep. You have to. There's just too much potential with the phone.
That sounds good to me as a person not dealing with it yet as a grandparent, but seeing that coming, and that makes all kinds of sense. When a child is feeling anxious, or a teenager, depression is a result, isolating oneself, what are some of the other big ones that you know of?
Desire to keep up with everybody, like I've got to have that article of clothing that everyone's wearing. I've got to have those boots that everyone's wearing. I cannot even breathe if I don't get those exact boots that everyone's wearing. That's the kind of thing I see. And then the isolation, yes, that's huge. And the crabbiness with parents. Sometimes kids just suddenly become very cranky with their parents. And that's because this inner tension is building inside the child.
And you use the word, I think, rage, sometimes speaking out or yelling out in rage when it's a relatively small matter. But that can be a sign of really high anxiety, right?
Yes, yes.
So we have 5 minutes left, Tina. What are some of the things that we as adults can do to help kids who are anxious?
I think the main thing that I would like people to remember is to just really tune into the child, make eye contact, be there, listen to the stories, do reflective listening, things like, you're really worried about XYZ happening today. Is there anything I can do to help you relieve that? Just to actually be therapeutic parents, which takes focus, it takes being in the present moment with the child. And when the parents bring themselves to the present moment with the child, that lowers their own anxiety as well, so it can work for both.
And I read somewhere that you said, and I thought this was so interesting, that you don't always, as a parent figure, need to solve the child's problem.
Yeah.
To just acknowledge that you are aware of it.
Yes.
Tell us just a little bit more about that, because that was important sounding.
Yes, it's almost like magic. It's like I see you. You are having this feeling in this moment. That's reflective listening. That relieves the child, and their demand to actually go to Target and buy whatever it was that they needed in that moment can just dissipate when the child is seen. It's just fascinating to watch it happen.
Oh, that's so interesting, Tina. So just the child says to himself or herself, she understands, he understands, and that is enough to bring the anxiety down.
Yeah, because I'm seen and my amygdala is not going to fire that there's a threat.
I'm understood. I don't have this threat I thought I had, or it's reduced.
Yes.
I'm guessing sometimes it's still there, the wish to whatever is still there.
Yes.
I'm getting the signal that we need to give some information to people. So if you would like to learn more about what Tina does, how she works, she has articles on her website, she has It's a very rich, helpful website. Give us the name of your website is.
parentingmojo.com.
So just PARENTINGMOJO.
Yes.
And mojo, I read on your website, is a word that I don't use often, but define it.
It's sort of like being in the groove of what you're trying to do. You know, you got your mojo on. Yeah.
You're self-confident.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a great word, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
So check out that website. I think you'll find it very helpful. And if people would want to work with you in a coaching way, you can do this on the phone, right?
Yes. Yes.
And you work with people all around the world, I understand.
Yes.
Which is exciting. Skyping?
Yes.
You do
Only
it that
we're
way?
using Zoom now. Zoom is more stable for us. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Do you ever just use email in the written exchange?
Occasionally, people have a question via email, but that's not really the coaching. So phone, Zoom,
So you need
and,
to have the interaction.
right.
To really coach.
That's right. Phone, Zoom, and in person in my office in St. Paul.
Yeah, so that's still an option in person, which is good to know. And your office is in St. Paul.
Yeah.
Of course, she has a center. I didn't even mention your center called
Center for the Challenging Child, and it's a parent coaching operation. Yes.
So you'll find more about that center via her website, of course. Well, thank you so much for coming down and educating me and the viewers. And it's always so fun to get your ideas because they're simple enough that I think we can all understand them and put them to use and try them out in practice and
Thank you.
hopefully get better at what we're doing as adults.
That's my hope.
Been talking with Tina Feigal. Check out her website, and thank you for being with us tonight. I'll be back next week. Till then, have a good week.